All right. Hi, everyone. Are we all in?
We have a pretty good group, so you can begin whenever you're ready.
Okay. We can go ahead and get started. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm excited that you're having experiences in order to develop strong communities of support for our families. As you might have seen on the Banu Valladares was listed as the presenter. Unfortunately, she's out sick today, so I'm standing in. Banu is the executive director of Charlotte Langer Preschool. She's our amazing leader and the community leader. I'm standing in for her. I'm the research and evaluation director at Charlotte Langer Preschool, where I collect data to help our programs respond to families' strengths, needs, priorities, values, and so on. Yeah, we both work at Charlotte Langer Preschool. Our mission is to prepare superior dual language, multicultural early childhood education. And our enduring vision is that Charlotte is a place where differences in language and culture are mutually enriching, and all children have greater access to advantage and opportunity. So with that, I'll pass it to Jamie to get us started with a little getting grounded exercise.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie Weiner, and just if you would just either write it on a piece of paper or think to yourself, answer the question, where is your head at right now in this moment? If you feel comfortable throwing it in the chat, you're also welcome. And then if you would also ask yourself, where is your heart at right now? All right. Thanks. Oh, we're breaking up a little bit. All right, I'm going to hand it back to you, Andrew.
All right. Thanks for taking a second to think about that. And I think it's important and relevant to what we're talking about today. And thinking about how everyone brings different experiences, different things. We all bring different things to each of our interactions. And everyone in this group is carrying something different that we may not know about and might not be our business to know about. But it's important to recognize that everyone comes from a different place, and everyone is carrying different things into their interactions that we have. So a few objectives for today. We're going to explore some concepts of trauma and resilience. We're going to identify some barriers to resilience, as well as strategies for promoting resilience. And we're going to celebrate the strengths of our community and lean on you guys to share different strategies that you have for helping families navigate trauma and helping promote resilience for the families we work with. So that said, there will be a few opportunities to share and provide input as we move forward. So I can't wait to hear some of your thoughts and ideas. So to get started, I want to ask first, who's here? So there should be a poll popping up to the left of your window. And it'd be great if you could click on that and answer those two questions. Let us know what you do and what is your knowledge level around ACEs and resilience. Is that working for everybody? There's the button on the left that says polls. So I'm looking at some results. Looks like we have a lot of direct service providers. We have many home visitors, a few parent educators, some home visitor supervisors, administrators. That's great. I can get to the other question. Looks like we have some varying level of knowledge about ACEs and trauma, these different topics. So for some of you, this might be some new information. For some, it might be refresher. But still, I think some informed lens of how we approach our families, how we see our families, which can influence how we work with our families. So with that, I will go back to here. Okay, thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here. So first, I want to give some background about this community advisory body that works with the board strategic to achieve their systemic vision. And the systemic vision is that all access to a range of parenting education supports from the prenatal period to age 8 within a coordinated delivery system, which will positively impact parent-child relationships and will span, right, going from before the child is born all the way to age 8. And the idea that it should be a coordinated system that works well. This advisory body's core values, the first and foremost is racial equity, where this body is committed to building and maintaining a system that remediates racial and economic inequity and strong equitable distribution of services. And they recognize that that work requires work at 4 different levels of change, such as personal, interpersonal, institutional, and structural changes. So we're committed to changing the systems that affect all of us. Other values that guide that work are the importance of valuing families' lived experiences and centering family and community voices, collaborating both with families and with partners we work with, trust. It's important to build strong relationships with our stakeholders, based approach where we work with families, partners, and each other to value and center our families' voices and build on their strengths and experiences, and recognize that every family experiences expert of their own family and brings strengths to the tables that can benefit us, the system, and everyone. So the members of this body possess knowledge of community services and service support systems for prenatal through age 8 parenting supports, have experience leading and helping lead collaborative planning efforts that prioritize historically marginalized communities, and have experience including informal and community service planning efforts, and then have experience implementing home visiting and parent education. So jump right in. We want to start by talking about adverse child experiences, or ACEs, which may affect some of our families. There have been several studies done in the past on ACEs, and there are 2 really important findings that come out of experiences are. So first, adverse childhood abuse and neglect, but also include other challenging experiences, parent incarceration, parent mental illness, substance use, and domestic violence. And unfortunately, one of the studies showed that around the general population, almost 60% of adults had experienced at least one of these adverse childhood experiences. And almost 10%, so almost 1 in 10, had experienced 5. Also, those rates tend to be higher in those providing social services, which can be a challenge and a strength, right? So we have this challenge of trying to navigate our own trauma while helping others navigate their trauma, but also the strength of having personal experiences that position us. So some of these rates are increased, where we have 70% of social service providers, one study showed, 50 or more adverse childhood experiences, and 12.5 report 5 or more adverse childhood experiences. ACEs and trauma more broadly are challenging and have effects on our development, our brain, and how we interact with the world. So in this case, trauma includes ACEs, but also includes other forms of trauma that occur in childhood or after childhood. And importantly, the experiences of trauma, stressful or threatening situations, we might be more likely to kind of denote experiences as threatening. It can lead to hypervigilance or hyperactive stress response, where we're constantly on the lookout for the next thing to happen. Next, fear with our ability to feel safe or develop trusting relationships. This can be especially important in our work and home visiting and work, where sometimes it can be difficult to navigate certain barriers to develop close relationships with our families, because there are barriers in place, right? There might be different things that get in the way. And furthermore, it's important to recognize that responses and reactions related to trauma might not always make sense to the outsider. There might be certain responses that someone who doesn't know the individual doesn't quite understand or thinks is kind of more not that rational. But if you know the individual well and know their trauma history, it might completely make sense how they behave, respond, or act. Importantly, resilience is the goal. Resilience is our ability to bounce back from in the face of trauma. Importantly, resilience does not mean getting over trauma or moving on from it. It's frequently more about adjusting and adapting to be able to move forward with trauma. And also, resilience doesn't mean that you don't have any more challenges. Like, resilience it's not this in place where you're finally resilient and everything is easy and great. It's a process, and it's a challenging process where the individual is continuously learning, growing. So we would love to know, in your work, when you work with families who are or have experienced trauma, what are some of the things that get in the way of your ability to support? A link to a Mentimeter. If you go to that link and use this code, you can answer the question and your responses will pop up. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second and move to a different screen. So I hope this works. If you're able to enter a response at that link, we should see some responses start popping up here.
Hi, Andrew. There are a few individuals in the chat who are having trouble hearing you. I'm hearing you fine, but maybe it's just the way the different settings are. So if you could turn off your camera to help, that would be great.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
I'm not trying to speak straight into the microphone. Sometimes I sway side to side.
And just as a reminder, since we can hear him on the speaker side clearly, that means that the recording will also show him clearly. So we are recording this and we'll be able to share it out.
So I'm not sure the Mentimeter is working, but I'm seeing a lot of really good responses in the chat. With trust issues as a common one. Resources, just building that initial relationship. Respect of culture and beliefs, that's huge. Personal trauma, trust and resources. Believe that nothing is wrong. Fear of change.
And Andrew, you may need to refresh your page. I am able to see the word cloud. Some of the choices include trust, chaotic lives, inadequate resources. Trust is in here quite a bit. Initial trust, trust issues, resistance, fear of change.
Absolutely. Okay, maybe it's working now. Yeah, trust is key, right? And there's sometimes just resilience, shame, lack of resources, lack of focus. Sometimes the family's not ready. Chaos, just general stress, availability. Yeah, trust seems to be a major theme. Which absolutely, how do you navigate that to build to that trusting relationship? To be able to truly make a difference and provide that support. That's excellent. Thank you all for sharing. What I'm going to do next is go to another link. So we have these different challenges that might get in the way. The next question is, how do you navigate those challenges, and what works to help you navigate those barriers? How do you create trust and navigate those different barriers that you mentioned? I think we have another link to an idea board, which is there in the chat now. So if you click on that, it will take you to this idea board where you can click the plus sign next to the question and enter your ideas on a little note card. Being non-judgmental, absolutely. And taking the time to get to know families, simply listening. Empathize. Empowering, I love that. And creating respectful relationships with families, of course. Being consistent, being present, part of that dependability. Makes me think sometimes when there are challenges, just continuing to be there, doing what you say you will do, continuing to show up. Building strengths, not deficits, absolutely. Helping families understand their trauma responses and how to navigate emotions and reactions. It's powerful. Allowing families to lead. I love that one. That's gotten a lot of votes, a lot of support. That's great. Thank you everyone for sharing. There's a couple more come in. I want to invite you to just take 30 seconds and just read some of the other responses. Take a minute, just read around and see what other ideas, what are things that maybe didn't jump out to you when you first heard the question, or different strategies, different ideas, or different things that you'd like to learn more about, kind of the details. How do you go about doing these different things? So take a minute to just read those different responses that your colleagues shared. Great. So I hope you saw some other ideas that maybe didn't jump to your mind right off the bat. And I think that's one of the power of, it's an example of the power of community and support, right? Where when we value everyone's strengths and expertise, it gives us the opportunity to learn from one another, develop new ideas together, and grow together. Just as that can be helpful for us, that can be helpful for our families as well. Giving the families a chance to lead and share ideas, provide information, and support others, share their expertise with other families as well. Right. I'm going to go back to here. So thank you again for sharing. So you just mentioned a ton of different ways to navigate those challenges and able to promote resilience. A few other ways from research just include social support, and that includes social support that meets individuals or families where they are, as a lot of you mentioned, acknowledges what they've been through, recognizes and validates their experiences, highlights their strengths, and provides real opportunities for families to be heard and understood as opportunities to lead and control their own experience. That can be done through access to community that provides resources and help. And as we just talked about, sometimes that includes community leaders with expertise and having access to those people who have knowledge about the systems, and that's important. And that can include access to community where family members can learn from other families who might be going through similar things or might have navigated certain systems in the past that can help them grow and move forward together. Home visiting is well positioned to respond to those unique experiences and characteristics of the entire family unit, because it gives us a chance to get to know families well, really meet families where they are, the chance to keep showing up, like you all mentioned, and keep growing together. So by developing that trusting relationship, we're able to prepare resilient families. And on one hand, that can help prevent ACEs or traumatic experiences for children in those families. And it can also help promote resilient families who might have experienced trauma in the past, and help prepare children with the resilience they need to navigate challenging experiences that they will face moving forward. So talk a little bit about our work at Burrello Preschool. One of the ways that we aim to promote resilience is through our value of comunidad, which means community. And to do that, we pride ourselves in creating a welcoming community for our families that honors their home language and invites families to speak in their home language. That's the first option for families. We prioritize their diverse cultural backgrounds. So we really want to create an environment where our families feel welcome. They feel comfortable speaking and being heard, and then be responded to. Our comunidad aims to respond to family strengths, values, preferences, and self-identified needs. That's one of the places where I come in to try to collect that information and inform our programs. And then our programs hope to facilitate mutual learning, kind of like what we just did, where our families, team members, and community representatives can learn home visiting program, where our normalized families experiences. So when families are experiencing stressful situations, or maybe having stress based on the phase of development that their child is in, or ELSs they report how they can say, this is okay. We're going to navigate this together. This is a normal experience. It's a phase, whatever that might be, to help validate what families are going through. Our ELSs focus on families' attachment behaviors as well as their educational involvement and children's social and emotional development. Really target those skills that build family resilience and child resilience. And we also try to engage our families in the broader child-bilingual preschool community so that families have more resources in the other families that are available. So when we think about trauma-informed care, think about how we respond to trauma and how we how we incorporate a trauma-informed lens in our work. And it can really be divided into these three areas, which first, it's important to realize how common trauma is, how trauma affects people, and how people can recover. So even though there are several unfortunate effects of trauma, challenges that trauma brings, we can recover. And one of the most important aspects that leads to recovery is having a trusted resource, a trusted source of support that can walk through that trauma with an individual. Next, it's important to recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma and the triggers of re-traumatization. And then finally, it's important to respond in a way that helps families navigate trauma rather than blaming or judging their natural responses to trauma. And one way to think about that is through the question of when there is kind of an unexpected reaction or a negative interaction, rather than blaming the family or asking what's wrong with you, the correct way to frame it, the better way to frame it would be, well, what happened? What happened that led to this? What's the underlying factor that's going on? What's going on in your family now that might be contributing to this? And how do we work together? How can I stand with you to navigate these challenges? An important consideration of trauma-informed care is also secondary trauma. And this is where, so secondary trauma is the trauma experience when learning about others' traumatic experiences. And in many cases, for many of you all, you're being asked to get to know, develop these close relationships with individuals who may have experienced trauma and stand with them, support them through their trauma. And that's so important, and it's very difficult, right? It's very heavy, it's exhausting, I'm sure. And notably, research has shown that it can be especially challenging and especially difficult for providers who have their own trauma histories. And as we talked about before, many providers are more likely to have experienced trauma than non-providers. So there can be, sorry, my puppy's here. There can be several different challenges that come up, and that makes it all more important that we take time for self-care and that we can create a community of support for our providers so that we can lean on each other, get support for one another, recognize that that we all bring different traumatic experience, different stressors to our interactions, and being there to support one another regardless. So now we want to go back to an idea board. I think there'll be another link added to the chat. And here we want to know, what does a trauma-informed space look like to you, and who is creating a trauma-informed space well?
And there is a question in the chat that you might be able to answer while folks fill out the idea board. It's in regard to trauma-informed care. Are there resources that address racism as one of the ongoing traumas, and how best to bring that up in a way that's respectful?
Absolutely. That's a great question. There are resources. I'm not sure that I have on hand now, but I can share some with Rachel later. I know her email address will be added to the end of this presentation. But that's a huge piece, is that trauma occurs. It's not just individual trauma that we experience, right? There are experiences that occur at maybe the community level or the broader systemic level that causes trauma for our individuals and can cause secondary trauma as well. So addressing those issues and helping us acknowledge the effects of that type of trauma and move through that trauma is always important. And I would definitely look for some, find my resources and share those with Rachel to disseminate as well. A lot of great responses here. I'm thinking sensitivity to cultural differences, respectful, kind, and patient care, and true listening. Active listening in itself, right? That's another response. That's great. It's not always easy to do, especially in our busy, chaotic lives that we're navigating as well. Asking open-ended questions, simply asking can be a step. In a space where people feel safe enough to share their experiences and can be heard. And again, that applies to both the families we work with, but also to ourselves. Hopefully we can have access to that space where we can feel safe and not feel judged and be able to share our needs and our experiences with others. Who is creating trauma-informed spaces? We have foster parents, we have families, the community, social agencies, faith-based organizations, home visitors. So creating trauma-informed spaces is really, it relies on all of us, all these different stakeholders to create a trauma-informed community. And hopefully we can work towards building systems that allow for a trauma-informed lens to be applied to our families, to our team members, to our employees, to everyone. These are all great answers. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, and you're welcome to keep adding ideas. I think another piece of that is that we're all accountable for creating trauma-informed spaces, where it doesn't just happen by itself. We can all inform the space that our families experience, or that our coworkers experience, or that our neighbors experience, and try to make that space more trauma-informed. So I'm going to come back here and go back to my screen. Thank you again for sharing those thoughts and ideas. To finish up, just want to share this figure. This is the bioecological model, which shows how each individual, in this case the child, is at the center of many other interactions and many other types of support or sources of support or sources of difficulty. So here we have the child in the center, kind of surrounded by the family, who's then surrounded by the community, who's then surrounded by society. And importantly, this figure, we see bidirectional interactions, right? So that society and different structures, white supremacy, different issues of equity, either non-equitable or equitable structures, can influence communities, can influence how we work, can influence how families develop and the experiences of families, and potentially the likelihood that families will be affected by trauma. And all of those factors contribute to the child and the child's growth and development and the child's ability to grow into a healthy, well-adapted adult. But it can also go the other way. And we can see that the child has an effect on the family, who has an effect on the community, an effect on society. And then so thinking about this in terms of resilience, if we develop structures that promote equity and promote resilience, we can develop a community that feels supported, that has access to resources, and can share those resources with the individual family, and develop that family's resilience, which in turn can develop the child's resilience. And moving forward in the future, it can go back the other way, where the child develops into a resilient adult who has a resilient family, who's empowered to develop a resilient community, which is again empowered to develop a more resilient and equitable society. I think that's pretty much all I have for today. So I really appreciate your participation and your contributions, and your being here. I hope some of this information was helpful. I'll work together those resources, and I'm happy to answer any other questions that come up in the chat.
Yes. Thank you so much for presenting. We loved hearing from you. Again, for those who had technical difficulties, we apologize. We have lifted this up to a support team, and they are working on that. The session was recorded, so you'll be able to review the recording as well as any slides after the event if you did have any technical difficulties, and you can share that out with your team. Our next session will be at 2 p.m. So please stay tuned to watch Spreading the Word about Home Visiting and Parenting Education. Actually, our next session is at 1 o'clock. Sorry.
Yeah.
Our next session is at 1 o'clock from 1 to 2:30. It's Advancing Racial Equity in Home Visiting. It's with Mr. Rodis Riggins, and he is a great presenter. So I look forward to you all joining me in that 90-minute session. And again, it's from 1 to 2:30. And we are going to post a survey link in the chat. So please provide your feedback about this session as well as the other sessions. So again, thank you so much. And our next session will be coming up shortly at 1 o'clock. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone, for being here and for all that you do.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and close out the session, but please grab that survey link and provide your feedback. And thank you so much. Next session is coming up at 1.